welcome to episode 383 of Retro Encounter, RPGFan's weekly podcast of many topics. Yes, I am trying to make it weekly again. We'll see how long I last. But today, I know I'm going to have no problem lasting the entire episode because I'm really excited to talk about this topic, Final Fantasy XVI, and the three other panelists I know are also enjoyers of FF16. This is a little bit less retro than our usual episodes, but permit us these a couple times a year. But joining me tonight are Zach Wilkerson.
Hello.
Gio Castillo.
Hey.
And Tin Manuel.
Hi.
Well, thank you, Tin, Gio, and Zach. Final Fantasy XVI was one of the biggest RPG releases of the year. It came out in July. There was a lot of discussion and a lot of excitement surrounding it. It was pretty well received by mainstream critics and maybe had a more mixed reception among our ultra-specific Final Fantasy fan audience. But I'm just going to say this right out of the gate. This is going to be a very positively toned episode because I loved FF16. I still have some feelings to work out about Zelda, but right now it's probably my favorite game I've played in 2023. But I also was very excited for it ahead of time. I bought into a lot of the hype. I watched a lot of trailers. But before we get into the meat of the discussion, I want you to tell us a little bit, how excited were you for Final Fantasy XVI when it was just coming out, or maybe just before it was coming out? Starting with you, Zach, who I know got to play the game a little early for review.
Yeah, I mean, I played it. They gave it to us pretty early. It was almost a month before it came out, and that never happens. Those of you who are listening and don't know anything about the way codes come in, a lot of times it's like 2 days before. Get it out 2 days before. But this time it was like a month. But even before that, I mean, I was sitting there next to my phone the day that I kind of knew the code was going to come in, and I downloaded it immediately. I told my partner we need to hang up the call now. I have a game to play. And yeah, I mean, I was obviously very taken with it. You can go read my review. And I was, saying things to the staff about how much I enjoyed it. And it's certainly for me, my game of the year. And, I haven't played some of the other big hitters yet. I just feel like this year is maybe going to go down as one of the greats. But I find it difficult to believe that I'll play something that I liked better than Final Fantasy 16.
Yeah. I mean, your feelings in the game are expressed very clearly in your review. You gave it a 97, but that 97 isn't even the highest number we've given to a game this year. 2023 is a crazy year for video games in general, maybe RPGs in particular. But Gio, what were your feelings on Final Fantasy 16, or maybe your hype level, either just before or very early on in its release window?
Yeah, until almost the week it was gonna come out, I was kind of just it was kind of middling. I didn't really feel very strongly about the game. I mean, I was excited because it's a new Final Fantasy and all, but um I'll admit I was one of those people who was like, oh, it doesn't look like the Final Fantasy I like. I don't. It doesn't look like 7. It doesn't look like 8 or But I was open minded. I wanted to give it a shot, and I came away liking it way more than I expected. And I think I was kind of infected by Tin, who was really much more excited for it than I was. Yeah.
All right, Tin. I think now you have to tell us. So, how excited were you, either just before or very early on in playing FF16?
Oh boy. Like I've been really looking forward to a new mainline, and just from the very first time that this game was announced, and that I've heard that it's gonna be done by CBU3, and I was just really so excited for this to come out sooner. I was even expecting it to come out last year, because remember when they were always saying that it's already done and it just needs some polish and stuff. And yeah, um fast forward to nearing release date, and uh hearing everyone doing the initial reviews already, just by bits of uh things that Zach was saying, that he was just having fun. It was already getting me so giddy, and I literally told Gio, the other person right here, that we have to be there at the physical shop the moment the mall opens to pick it up. So yeah, I played it as soon as we got home, and yeah, the rest is history.
Now, you did mention CBU 3 or Creative Business Unit 3. That's a division within Square Enix that handles Final Fantasy 14 and Final Fantasy 11. And I think that was maybe the thing before FF16 came out that had me the most excited.
Mm-hmm.
A mainline Final Fantasy game, which we know will always have the biggest budget of a Square Enix game, headed by Naoki Yoshida, aka Yoshi P, music by Masayoshi Soken. That was exciting to me. Then every trailer I saw just seemed to be dramatic and exciting. And it was centered around Final Fantasy summons, which I thought was a really good decision because FF summons are, I think, one of the coolest things about Final Fantasy. And I didn't really know a lot of what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
But every bit of hype I saw for FF16 really made it look like this game was going to be huge and special, and I think that those ideas played out. Uh, and also we can talk about the gameplay a little bit later. Let's talk about Clive, uh, the hero of Final Fantasy 16.
How
Clive.
many hours do we have?
Oh boy. I would love for this podcast to be under 2 hours, but we'll do our best. I mentioned this in an episode earlier this year, but I feel like Clive is was sort of just designed to be as cool and appealing as possible because
Mm-hmm.
he's handsome, he's stylish, he is both he both is a former noble and was a slave for many years, so he has like so he's sort of like a man of the people in multiple ways. um he's an awesome swordsman and an awesome magic user. He is somehow like gruff and a little bit edgy, but also very friendly and accepts everyone around him. It's like they sort of I think that they are investing a lot into Clive in a way that like they just worked really hard on making the best Final Fantasy protagonist they could, and I think it basically worked because I love the man.
I mean, and I think they kind of needed to with the way this game is structured.
Mm-hmm.
One of the criticisms that I hear from people, even people I respect, are like, I feel like the party dynamics aren't as strong as they could be. Even though you have people in your party, they don't feel like they're really participating as much as maybe they do in other games. But Clive manages, because of the things you said, I think, manages to carry so much of the emotional weight um, uh, centered on him. And even if there isn't as much party chatter or whatever, like there might have been even in 15, I just think that he is a person who I was happy to follow for 70 hours, because he's such a fascinating person and so deeply relatable, but also just so freaking cool.
I do agree with Zach. A lot of people really like, would nitpick each and each dominant apart from Clive, and uh a lot of people are not really getting that this story is focused entirely on Clive. And before even I started playing the game, I was also wondering when they were interviewing each developer who worked on this game, and they were all asking who's your favorite one, and all of them just straight up would answer Clive. And yeah, after playing the game, I understood why.
Yeah, Zach had made a good point in that Clive bears the emotional weight of the story, but also sort of the gameplay burden of the story. He's the only character manipulated by the player. The game plays basically like a solo action RPG, but very quickly and intensely. And you can call on Torgal for an assist in certain moves. And oh boy, do you remember the I think the first fight against Benedicta, the small version, where she like kicks Torgal aside and
Yeah, I
he's
hated her.
yeah, and he's away from the battle for a little while, but then he comes in and makes a save when she gets down to the 25% mark or something. Like like even though this is the gameplay is solo action and Clive is the player is a passenger to Clive's story the entire time, like the interactions I feel are really good. Like they make the entire cast likable because
Mm-hmm.
not only is Clive a strong protagonist, he's a good sounding board for everyone else. And in the non-Clive division, I mean, I mentioned Torgal, your dog. It's I mean, of course they make Clive even more likable by making him a dog person. And but your two steadfast companions for the first half of the game, other than Torgal, are Clive's childhood friend Jill and Clive's mentor Sid. And I mean, can we just throw this out there right now? I think this is one of the best Sids we've ever had.
Oh, it
Yeah,
is the
I would
best Sid,
agree.
in my
It's the
opinion.
best Sid, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
Yeah.
he's phenomenal.
he's awesome. Like he's very gruff, but also just so likable. He fights with two swords. He's so cool. He has these lightning powers, but you can also tell he's sort of suffering a little bit and very world weary. Uh, and the timbre of that actor's voice is I'm not surprised he gets voiceover work in the UK because it's a killer voice.
Yeah. Oh my
Mm-hmm.
God, the voice acting for Clive is amazing. I wanted to say that. Clive,
Yeah,
Clive's voice actor killed it.
the
I like.
performances in this game are strong all around.
Yeah. I like. I mean, a big part of why Clive works is that I forget Ben Starr, like he put in like a performance for the ages, I think, like in terms of like he the the way he emotes at the end of the game, like I mean I don't want to get there yet, but yeah, like it's a big reason why I personally fell in love with Clive.
Yeah,
And
I mean, I think that the voice acting is amazing, but I think about like Sid, and it makes sense given where it goes. It sort of ends up being sort of like a proto Clive, to some degree, and he has a lot of very similar characteristics. A little more gruff, maybe a little more sarcastic, a little more world weary, but I think that the things that make Clive work are the same reasons we like Sid, and he's just like so effortlessly cool. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's awesome, but also like the relationships he has with people. He's very believable as the leader of the hideout, and if he doesn't win our best supporting character this year, I will be astounded.
the only like end of year award I'm more certain of is Torgal winning best mascot or animal.
Right.
Yeah.
There's, I mean, if anything else wins, I will quit the website. But I mentioned part one, part two, or things of that nature. This game is sort of divided into, I think, some pretty discernible chunks. The game opens with Clive as the member of some kind of special forces operation of basically magic using assassins that are targeting the dominant of the Iron Kingdom. There's a big battle going on between the Dalmatian Republic and the Iron Kingdom, and Clive's unit is from the Empire of Sambrek, but their goal is to kill the summoner of Shiva, who's a captive of the Iron Kingdom. And but then Clive, I think he takes a fall or a hit, and suddenly we're thrown back to teenage Clive, and sort of we learn there's sort of a how did I get here kind of moment. And it shows that Clive was the prince of a nation called Rosaria. He has his younger brother Joshua was the dominant of Phoenix, which is, dominant is their word for summoner, and icon is their word for summon. Um, we get sort of gameplay tutorials because because Clive is sort of it was sort of knighted by Joshua. Joshua is able to let Clive borrow a tiny bit of Phoenix's powers, so he can use some fire spells and fire moves in addition to swordplay, even though Clive is unable to summon anything directly at this time. Uh, and you meet your childhood friend Jill. You meet Torgal as a puppy. You meet Clive and Joshua's very cool dad and very uncool mom. Um, I'm just gonna throw this out there. Is Annabella, their mother, maybe the most hateable character in this whole game?
Oh, I mean, it's not even close.
She like and this game gets compared to Game of Thrones often because
Mm-hmm.
they were trying, I think they were trying to capture some of Game of Thrones' politics and drama and brutality, or its blend of those three things. Annabella Rosfield really reminded me of Cersei Lannister from Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
Cersei Lannister is like 5 times more relatable. I mean, like Annabella is like in a game where there are 100 amazing characters who are all relatable in some way. She somehow manages to carve out. There are moments that I felt bad for her, like toward the very end. But man, she's so hateable. She's the worst.
She's awful. Just out of sheer annoyance towards Clive, she sells out their entire kingdom, basically. At the end of the flashback, Clive's father and brother and Clive are all traveling together to sort of to inspect a fort and possibly defend against an upcoming offensive. But it goes horribly wrong because Annabella, Clive's mother, and uh, basically sold out their kingdom to the Empire of Sambrek. Clive's brother Joshua appears to die. There's a huge explosion of flame where Phoenix and an unknown fire icon attack each other, and but Clive is found alive and is enters slavery through the Empire of Sambrek, which puts him in this sort of special forces dead men unit, which takes us back to the very very beginning of the game. And there he reunites with Jill, who is the summoner of Shiva, or the dominant of Shiva, and had been captured by the Iron Kingdom years ago. And then Clive and Jill together are picked up by Sid, who's the dominant of Ramu and can use some thunder magic, and sort of and turns out that Sid is the person who adopted Torgal years ago in Clive's absence. So for the large like first third or first half of the game, Clive, Jill, Torgal, and Sid are sort of the crew that you roll with. And we haven't really mentioned Jill yet. She is maybe the most ever present companion to Clive, other than Torgal. What do we think of her? Because I think she's had a bit of more of a mixed reception compared to Sid.
Mm-hmm. Well, for me, I do like Jill, like um her her summon and her personality overall. But in this game, since I since the focus is literally in on Clive, I was really hoping that the next DLC that they would come up with is about her life in Iron Kingdom. I really want to get further into that, but it didn't make sense to me that when we reached to that part when you um uh she meets up this woman, and they had this like very heartfelt conversation about keeping a promise and such. Like it didn't make sense to me that there's nothing else beyond that. Like I really want to look further into that.
I think that there's a lot of sort of implied relationships or implied things that happened behind the scenes in this game, only because this is a big expensive game and
Yeah.
they can't show every single event as text on the page. That's probably why they created that active time lore.
Yeah.
For a lot of parts of the game, you can pause and sort of go over the different topics or characters or locations being discussed and get information on all of them. And I found myself pausing to learn active time lore all the time. That's how I learned that Jill is not from Rosaria, where Clive and Joshua are
From the
from.
north.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Hmm.
she's from a defunct kingdom in the far north. Was taken in as a sort of political prisoner to be Clive and Joshua's companion,
Hmm.
and ended up being a
Hmm.
close friend to them. But also because Shiva's power originates from the north, it's probably why she was able to become Shiva's dominant later in life.
Yeah. Unfortunately, if I had to name my largest criticism of this game, it would be Jill. And I agree with everything that Tin said. I think that her design is incredibly cool. I think that her version of Shiva is really cool. But where I struggle with her is I agree with you, Tin. I think that whole sequence in the Iron Kingdom is like half baked. It's like she has this incredible, like almost out of nowhere, she's like, I need revenge so badly. And like we had never really heard that before. And then as she's going through it, we see these couple of relationships and we kind of get an idea that they're like doing child sacrifices, but it's never made clear. But my biggest issue is like outside of that, I can't name a single character trait that Jill has except for I like Clive.
Hmm.
And so when you get to that scene on the beach where like out of nowhere she's like, "Oh, you need my power," and he's like, "Really?" And he's like, "Okay, I guess I'll take it." And that's the end of the conversation. I'm very troubled by the way that she is sort of written. And, you know, I know a lot of people on the internet are like, "Oh my gosh, the female characters in 16 are the worst." I totally disagree with that. Um, but I do think that Jill is pretty weakly written. And if they did a DLC, I would love for it to focus on Jill because I think there's a lot of potential there. But I feel like it gets so consumed by her relationship to Clive, which makes sense. But every other character in the game, I think, literally like, I think about Isabella, I think about Tarya, all these other female characters who have a personality are given that, and Jill. I think this game has a Jill problem. It's literally my number one criticism.
My number one criticism of FF16 is sort of related to Jill. There's just so much suffering depicted in this world that I felt like it was dragging down my own fun a little bit. Like I don't of course they should be allowed to tackle challenging subjects like slavery or sex work, and they do, but it feels like everyone in this game is a former slave, and
Mm-hmm.
and branded, which are magic users are second class citizens in this world. Although Clive's father is one of the few nobles that treated them with respect. You're always hearing about slaves being murdered or slaves stuck in the system. And Clive is a former slave, and Jill was with the Iron Kingdom, where magic users are treated even worse than usual, and she was basically tortured into becoming Shiva's dominant. It's I just wish that there was I don't know. I felt like I was just of all the topics that FF16 like addresses, I felt like they were hitting us with the slavery hammer a lot. But I basically agree. I think Jill's great. I like her design. I like her presence, but she felt just a little bit undercooked. Like because maybe it's because so much of the focus is on Clive and to a lesser degree Sid. Like I feel like they didn't give Jill like enough room to work, enough dialogue with people other than Clive. She didn't. I don't. I think that she's a good character, but she maybe feels underused or because they just didn't give her a lot of room to work with.
I mean, not to get into Joshua yet, but like, I feel like they could have combined Jill and Joshua in a way. Like maybe Joshua could have stayed dead and Jill kind of took on what Josh would do. It would have been better, I think, for the story. I don't know. Like it's just like she's so underbaked. She's so under like every other line from her is just like how much she loves Clive, and I feel like she would have been a richer, more full character if she was more integral to the story. At least I don't know.
I feel like she's important to Clive, but I felt like they didn't really give her enough unique dialogue or dialogue other than just agreeing with Clive and saying let's go to the next place uh to have her shine as a character like I mean for female characters in previous Final Fantasy games we can probably identify one or more key moments that define her as a character, but with Jill what's her key moment that defines her? It's giving her powers to Clive or being rescued by Clive.
That's a good way
Hmm.
of putting it.
Personally, I couldn't think of any other character actually that's um a good partner for Clive but Jill alone. But that was a problem. Like comparing to all other dominants, I feel like she had the worst time, and they didn't really um talk about that properly. I'd say like she
Yeah,
was used as a weapon for years and all that, and even um they didn't even also talk about like how she get into Rosaria and all that. So yeah,
yeah, you have to find some of that buried in the active time lore, and
yeah.
and this game has a lot of lore. Like if you talk to the lore master character in the Hideaway, or the sort of politics mistress, oh shoot, what's her name? Vivian. The like it. There's a lot of like if you want to, you can just read background lore to this game over and over. This is like almost Elder Scrolls or Dragon Age levels of storyline hidden in the back for you to find. But let's move on from Jill a little bit. You mentioned that she's like the least developed of all the dominants. The first dominant that we encounter as an opponent in this game is Benedicta, who's an officer in the Kingdom of Waloed. I think she's their spy mistress or head of information bureau or something. And she's the dominant of Garuda, the wind summon. And in Benedicta, who's only really in the first quarter of the game, maybe first 20% of the game, we get that she is sort of behind her king's back in a relationship with the dominant from the Dalmatian Republic. She has a past with Cid where it seems that he rescued her from a ghetto and helped her out of poverty. She's maybe still in love with Cid. There's but she's also sort of like she's had sort of like a sadistic edge to her when she's fighting Clive or taunting Clive and Cid. And again, she's like the first sort of antagonist that you clash with in the game. But I feel like she had a lot of personality, and they gave her more sort of meaningful story moments than Jill got. And it gets really dramatic after you defeat her. She sort of loses control of her powers and turns into a giant version of Garuda. Clive has to fight her on foot and then transform into a giant Ifrit to defeat her. And I guess we've glossed over it a little bit. That's the moment where Clive discovers that he was the monster that fought Phoenix in the flashback years ago, and that leads Clive to believe that he murdered his brother Joshua because he was unable to control his own flame powers. And that's one of the first moments that we get in sort of Clive dealing with this, like of some major emoting coming out of Ben Starr's likeness. But what do we think of the battle with Benedicta and Clive dealing with being Ifrit?
Oh, those battles are super cool.
Yeah, they basically give you kaiju fights like 4 or 5 times in the game that are giant Final Fantasy summon versus Final Fantasy summon, and they are incredible. For the for how unique this battle system is compared to past Final Fantasy games, like the level of spectacle and action is amazing, especially in the icon battles.
No, I mean, I think that you get a little taste of it when you have the Ifrit Phoenix fight, but here it's like, okay, this is what this game is capable of doing. And then up through the next few icon fights, it just like they ratchet it up, ratchet it up, ratchet it up until you're literally like fighting in space. Although the Titan fight, I think, is still my favorite. But yeah, I mean, I think that mixing how fun I think the combat is in general with the spectacle of it, and even like some of the QT stuff, like I'm cool with because it's just like so fun to watch. But I also just think that Benedicta, I know, as you were describing her, I'm like, oh, like personality was just described as like 3 men in her life, and I think there's something to that. But she has such an aura and a presence that I still feel like she is a really compelling villain, and I think that, well, I would have liked to have seen more of her. I do think it is impactful from a storytelling perspective how quickly she's taken out by Clive, and it helps characterize Cid, and it does all these other things. And I think that it's really cool, and I really like that moment that Torgal, goes and bites her too.
Yeah.
It's
Oh
a good
god.
sequence.
I gasped when she kicked Torgal away, and then gasped again when he came back in to dramatically save Clive. It was the battles are the combat in this game is consistently exciting, but the scripted moments, like the big icon QTEs and some sort of battle interruptions like the Torgal moment, are just incredible. Like this game is basically fun to play, but when they move into set pieces, I think that's where it crosses the line into just into downright awesome. It reminds me of like the best fights in Devil May Cry or God of War games.
I feel like Benedict is like kind of a dark horse candidate for like DLC almost, because like there's a lot to her that's like kind of just hinted at. Like she has so of all the dominants, she's like the one who's like most dependent on being a dominant. Like she was like the most sad when she lost her powers to Clive, and she clearly has like some like self-esteem issues, and like the the very short flashback that we saw of like her meeting Sid, like there's so much there. There's so much there. She. It's true that she's kind of like defined by the men in her life, but there's so much to explore. I really enjoyed her too. Like I thought she was um uh more compelling than some of the other antagonists in the game, I'd say.
We'll talk about the one antagonist I feel is the least compelling.
Um,
I think you probably know who I'm talking about as well.
Yeah.
But
yeah, probably thinking maybe the same person.
probably, yeah. But I don't want to spend too much time in one place because there's just a lot to deal with here. Clive sort of is wrestles with the idea of being Ifrit. It has to sort of go into he enters a ruin by Phoenix Gate where that disaster happened in the past, and is able to sort of confront the icon within him in one of the I think one of the best fights in the game,
Oh,
where
it's so
yeah,
cool.
where Clive
Yeah.
has to fight a giant, sort of a dark tinged version of himself. Then he transforms into Ifrit to fight a bigger Ifrit, and the music that plays in that fight is amazing. And two people I haven't really mentioned yet: Masayoshi Soken's soundtrack in this game, awesome. I think is the final version that releases is going to be, was it like 6 discs or something insane?
It's 7 with an eighth bonus disc.
Holy moly! And I mentioned that the battles remind me of God of War, Devil May Cry. That was a little bit deliberate on my part because Ryota Suzuki, one of the lead designers of Devil May Cry 5, was the battle supervisor on this game, and I think that like Clive is so fun to control. The icon battles are so awesome, and even the skill system I think is fun to play around with in this game. They just knocked almost every gameplay theater out of the park, unless you are so attached to the idea of multi-character combat that you automatically dislike it. But to them, I say I want every action game and every RPG to be as fun as this one.
Yeah, specifically that awakening scene or that awakening moment for Clive, I literally felt like a kid and playing something and for the very first time and finding a really really cool character that you like and you'd be like, Mom, I want to be this guy. That's literally how I felt after going through that scene.
Yeah. I mean, I felt like when I first played Final Fantasy IV, sorry, spoiler alert for a very old game, when Cecil has to confront himself. And just like it at the time, I just thought that was like mind blowing. But here, it's like a full actualization of what that can look like. And it's such a, even though I knew something like that was going to happen, it is the execution and the music. Oh,
Mm.
the music! It super sells that moment.
I really think that this game's core concepts and its action and its music and visuals are always enhancing each other. Like every time there was an amazing battle or I learned a new skill, the next battle or the next skill managed to increase the stakes even more. And again, this game is basically melodrama with some politics with lore buried behind a lot of text. But the moment to moment gameplay, I just felt just kept getting better and better, and I almost couldn't believe that every time I encountered something that was bigger than the thing before it. And it's, I mean, the first big set piece, I also sort of don't count the Ifrit versus Phoenix fight at the beginning, are the battles against Benedicta, and it just set such an incredibly strong precedent. And and yeah, like I felt like a little kid playing oh, I don't know, playing like Chrono Trigger for the first time and thinking that this game is going to become my whole personality. Like
Yeah.
that's how I felt when
Same here.
with the Find the Flame battle. But after this, the next set of missions take place in Sandbreck. You meet one of my one of my favorite minor NPCs here, the proprietor of the brothel in one of the towns outside Sandbreck. Oh man, I feel awful for forgetting her name, but I played.
Isabel's amazing.
Yeah, Isabella. Yeah, she's incredible. This game, even the minor characters in this game are awesome. But yeah, basically you go there to try and because Sid has determined that the crystals that sustain life on the all the civilizations here are also draining life from the surrounding land and slowly turning it into ash. So Clive's new mission is to sort of destroy the source of power and protection that civilization has relied on, so that the world can recover. Like harkening back to the days of when Final Fantasy kingdoms revolved around the crystals they housed, and how there was a quasi-environmental threat in the back of the more immediate threat, kind of like Final Fantasy VII. That felt very throwback to me, when every kingdom had a crystal, and there was both political threats and monster threats and environmental threats. Again, this game is extremely modern, but was like deliberately trying to throw it back to Final Fantasy of the past in a way that I almost always found satisfying. But that ends in sadness. You meet Ultima for the first time, or in the form of of sort of an avatar of his, and determine there's some godlike being that is trying to stop whatever Clive's doing. And sadly, Sid loses his life at the end of that conflict. But before doing so, passes his remove powers to Clive. And I think we haven't mentioned this yet, but Clive gains Benedicta's Garuda powers after defeating her, and then and then we mentioned that eventually Jill gives him Shiva powers and Sid gives him remove powers. Clive is a little bit Mega Man. He gets the special abilities of everyone he defeats.
Yeah, exactly. Like a new part of Mega Man customized onto
And
his body.
and every time you get icon powers, that sort of adds skills to the list of abilities that you can equip. And I had so much fun just experimenting with new moves and upgrading and leveling up, or switching out skills in this game, because by the end, Clive has like between 30 and 35 abilities you can mix and match around with. But
Sounds
Yeah.
about right. Yeah.
but you can only equip 9 at a time, or 12 at a time if you count base abilities, because you can there's a lot of skill customization you can do, and setting your loadout and experimenting with skills is something I like in a lot of RPGs, especially ones with class systems, although this one lacks that. They did a really good job with that in this game.
I'm curious what everyone's loadout was at the end. Like, there's just so many options. Like, for me,
Yeah.
I always had the Titan shield thing going on, and Deadly Embrace. Like, I always had that on, and Shiva's powers were OP, so I always had like the big one. I can't remember what it's called, but yeah,
Diamond Dust.
Diamond Dust. Yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, Diamond Dust, the how it builds your stagger is absurd.
Yeah.
yeah.
I
It's
mean, this game
ridiculous.
She
this
was
game
a
was already like
cheese.
not very difficult before that, but man, once I had like I would
Yeah.
just get them like 75% of their stagger meter down, then throw Diamond Dust out, and they're staggered.
Yeah,
Towards the end of the game, I used Shiva a lot because I just like the Shiva base ability that was basically just a quick icy dash that could
Yeah,
Mhm.
also
cold snap.
And you
Yeah, yeah.
freeze them.
that could
Permafrost.
that could freeze or slow enemies as you pass them. I really like the Phoenix quick teleport. I use that over and over in the
Oh,
game,
same here.
and the Titan counter. So I used Phoenix, Titan, and Shiva the most by the end. But I had a mix and match of Garuda and Bahamut skills on there. The Odin skills you get at the very end are so powerful. But I was already just really attached to the skills I was using, so
Mhm.
I messed
Mm.
around with Odin for a little bit. But by the end, I was mostly fixated on Ifrit, Titan, Shiva, with some Garuda and Bahamut skills mixed in.
Yeah, I mean, I was all over the place. Like Impulse, which is like a weirdly not very powerful skill, was like one of my absolute MVPs,
No,
just because I could stand away and build up stagger
yeah,
without
no,
doing anything.
yeah,
Mhm.
that's just like throwing out your little Bahamut satellites and them stunning enemies and building up stagger for
Yeah.
you. I used Impulse.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and I've played through the first half again in Final Fantasy mode where you can carry all the things over, so I've kind of done it all. Like apparently, like the meta is like basically an Odin build, which makes sense.
Yeah,
But I just thought Zentik Sutsun is so fun to use when you can build it, but like it didn't feel good to me to have moves that didn't really do damage that were just meant to build towards that. So I
Yeah,
didn't do much with it.
if you equip Odin skills, then I think your entire build sort of becomes
Hmm.
I need to just build the Odin meter up to Zantetsuken. Like and I'm sure it's very powerful, and it did seem strong for when I messed around with it a little bit. But it's like I don't want to just devote all of my energy to Odin right now. I like my
Hmm.
weird mix of stuff. But for me, the most satisfying thing to do was a full Titan counter, because I just loved the
Oh yeah.
I love the giant counter punch, and I also loved the wind up skill, which is just, again, just giant meaty stone punch. Whatever. If I had a favorite skill set in the game, it probably was Titan.
Yeah. My second time through, I used a lot more Shiva and Titan, but I kind of used it all. But yeah, it's like getting either of those right, like the permafrost with Shiva or the Titan counter, incredibly satisfying. Not necessary. Like I'm like I could kill this enemy way faster, but like I want to counter it because it's so fun.
Yeah, and Titan, multiple Titan moves have counter properties that are just really fun to deal with.
Even the Titan block animation really made it extra satisfying.
My favorite is the giant ooh grunt that Clive does
Yeah.
when you use the wind up skill. But
Yeah.
but yeah, again, this game is just fun start to finish. And Titan is the character, is the icon that you encounter next after Sid passes away. But leading up to that, Sid passes away, and Clive takes on the name of Sid and sort of becomes the new Sid the Outlaw, because it's better to, it was more valuable to inherit that reputation than form a new reputation, because their goal is to save as many branded magic users as they can, and also enact meaningful change in the world and destroy the all of the crystals in on the two continents. But the next part of the game is going through the Desert Kingdom. On the way, like trying to sort of get to Hugo, the very very powerful figure within the Dhalmekian Republic that is also Titan's summoner. Um, uh, uh, we get one of my favorite moments in the entire game, where Clive reunites with his uncle Byron.
Mhm.
I actually cried when Byron like drops his axe and goes, "You never let me play Sir Crandall," because like because Clive like does a monologue from a play that they used to enact together when Clive was a child. But yeah, I mean, I'm all over the place here. I'm sorry, but Hugo is another sort of larger than life character, and he becomes the game's antagonist for a section of the middle of the game, even though the threat of Ultima is sort of looming behind him. What do we think of Hugo?
He was my least favorite dominant, I'd say.
Oh,
Um,
really? Because we
yeah,
weren't
like
we weren't talking about the same person then.
yeah. Compared to everyone, I do love like the fight between him and Clive. It was also the coolest fight, and also had the coolest
So
battle
epic.
music. Yeah, but I'd say like among all of the other dominants, he was all I could remember about Kuka is that he was just the leader and all of that republic, and also the dominant of Titan, and also just crazy obsessed about Benedicta. That's the only thing I could think about his personality overall.
Huh. It's interesting because I like Kuka a lot. I think he's a great villain. And I think part of it is that he's so imposing. Like I feel
Mhm.
like he's genuinely frightening. And granted, I think that his, as much as I like the icon fight after it, I think that his is my favorite. Like I was just like my jaw was on the floor. I was just laughing because it was so insane. Like running up those arms, and then the last one, like I was like, oh, there's another phase to this. Yes, please. Yes, please. But I think that given what he does to the hideout right before the time jump, I think that the fact that his motivations are still at least clear, and I understand them, and I understand why he would be upset, and how he sort of like lost his mind, and like the fact that he loses his hands, Jamie Lannister style, I thought was pretty funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
um, I think that Kupka's a pretty imposing villain, and I actually liked him quite a bit. There's one later that I thought was pretty weak, but this one I liked.
Yeah, no, I generally liked Hugo Kupka. like it was basically just sort of rage and sorrow following Benedicta's death, with an obsession with Sid, which turns into an obsession with Clive when he realizes that Clive is the person who both killed Benedicta and has been Sid for the interim after the death of the original Sid. And like just so his and he's also just so horrible. He kills a lot of people in the original hideout, including some people that did side quests for maybe minutes earlier. um and then he seizes the control of Clive's former home, in Rosaria. He almost executes Jill right in front of him, but then Torgal gets a transforming superhero moment right before that happens. Clive cuts off Hugo's hands just after that, which doesn't endear Clive to Hugo any more than before. And then culminating in the truly insane awakened Titan fight where he eats the crystal of Dalmatian Republic and turns into some crazy hecaton sheer size of an entire city Titan that again was maybe my favorite fight in the game, but at least just another instance of the game just continually outdoing itself.
Uh, yeah, I totally agree. Like him eating the crystal is just like a what WTF moment, but like in the, but it's just hilarious. There's actually a lot of funny moments with Kupka, like when he doesn't have his hands anymore. He's trying to eat, and he can't eat it, so he just breaks the table. It's pretty funny, and just I don't know. I find him he's pretty good actually. He's a pretty good character. I find him like he kind of defies the stereotype of like of being like a simple-minded brute because he's actually like kind of a schemer. Like he's
Yeah, no,
kind of savvy. Yeah.
he's a cunning brute. He reminded me like of a like a leader of a gang or something, because he like the Dalmec. I don't think he's the leader of the Dalmatian Republic. I don't think, because again I
He's
think,
the economic advisor, but
yeah.
he essentially exerts his will when he wants to.
Yeah. Again, this is another thing for the for all of the lore deposits in this game. But like Dalmatian Republic does not have a monarch, but because Hugo wields so much power and wealth and clout, he is the ruler of the Republic, at least effectively. Which
Yep.
again makes him seem like like the boss of a mafia or a or a political machine or
Yeah,
something.
I mean, like the very first scene you meet him in, he takes like the supposed leader, I think, of the Republic and pushes him down. So yeah, um, I think Kupka's interesting, and I like all the stuff in Dalmekia too. I think that the what's his name, even the side character there, Lubor, I think is a
Oh yeah,
great
yeah.
character too. I think it's like that and the next sequence, I think, are to me like the two strongest sequences in the game. And part of it for me is that I was invested in Kupka as a villain.
I want to talk about side characters like Lubor a little bit right now, because as you go through the game, you're exploring new corners of the continent, and encountering a lot of people. Like we mentioned, Isabella, the madam of the brothel in Sandbreck, and Lubor is sort of an influential merchant in part of in a desert town in the Dalmatian Republic. Like throughout the game, you meet these people that are sort of associates of Sid or power players within Sid's resistance. They give you badges or icons that allow you to interact with resistance people in their region, and sort of like it's I think it's better later in the game, and maybe they backload too much of it to the end of the game, but all of the side content and these minor characters that you meet and how their quest lines go deeper into those characters, it felt like the side quests were kind of weak at the beginning of the game when you're just sort of like
Hmm.
introducing yourself to people, but by the end of the game I was so attached to all of them, because
Yeah.
they're like Mass Effect loyalty missions. Like they take this large cast and endear the player to them by giving you a lot of great dialogue and good writing when you help them in these optional side quests. And Lubor and Isabella are two of the best ones. But either characters in the hideaway or characters in the larger world, do we have a favorite sort of not top billing kind of character? I
Uh,
have my answer, but I'll let someone else go first.
there are so many to pick from. And to pause for a second and talk because about the side quests in general, like I agree. But like I've heard a lot of people complain about the side quests, but for me, I'm like, I don't want big complicated side quests. I want side quests that tell good character stories. And I think that towards the end, right before the time jump, when like I don't know, like that person tries to sick a dog on you to kill you because they think you're a bearer, and then like you end up having to bury them. I think that's a beautiful side quest. And there are so many good side quests in this game that I didn't mind that they weren't complicated. Like I don't want I don't like mini games in my RPGs. I know that there are exceptions to that, but for the most part, like I don't need that. But in terms of my favorite side character, I think I don't know, Byron's up there, but I know you probably want to pick.
I won't talk about Byron.
Yeah, I got to go with Gav. Good old Gav. Gav is amazing because he feels like of the side characters who non-dominance, he feels like the most critical. In a lot of ways to me, he's phenomenal. Just like that the way he grows throughout the game, like the way Sid sort of treats him at the beginning, and then he becomes such a critical part of the hideaway. And I also like that like they're almost all the side quests are located around the hideaway, so I don't have to go looking for them. I appreciated that. But Gav's great. I can't believe I didn't pick Blackthorn, but I'm gonna go with Gav.
For me, my favorite is probably Isabel. Although I also have a soft spot for Quentin from Lost Wing. They kind of have like similar arcs, and well, not really, but I mean they serve similar roles in their communities, and um actually the culminating side quest of Isabel with like the conflict with like the remnants of the Sandbreak Empire was like really compelling to me. Like I feel like the side quests really help make the world, they help the world feel full, and they kind of, I don't know if they're political per se, but they have like, they mirror our real world in a way that I found tasteful and um compelling. Like they actually have a point, I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember
Yes,
I saw a lot of complaints about the side quests while I was playing. And at the beginning I sort of agreed with him. I was like, yeah, these side quests are mechanically sort of boring. You're fetching something or killing something and then reporting back. But the deeper you go, they you learn more about the communities you're serving and the sort of key characters in each location. I think the side quests get better and better, but start maybe slightly boring. And by the end, I felt very, very attached to way too many characters in this game. But the side quest that I think is my favorite overall is the White Winged Wonder side quest, where you chase after a chocobo that is sort of become the ringleader of the local chocobos around Martha's Rest, and then you realize that it was actually Clive's old chocobo steed
Oh,
Ambrosia from when he was a
yeah.
teenager. And after that you sort of you save some local chocobos, and Ambrosia becomes your steed again. And I don't know, I mean I love the Seto stuff in Final Fantasy 14 so much, and the Boko stuff in Final Fantasy 5 so much. I think I just get emotional when Final Fantasy respects their chocobos.
Oh man, or the end of the Torgal side quest when
Yeah.
he's missing
Oh,
Sid.
That
Oh,
was,
so good.
yeah,
oh, and
I
you
was
and you
gonna
go to
say.
their old treehouse.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
it's
Oh,
phenomenal. So
That
good.
was my favorite. I'd say that was my favorite side quest. But going back to what you said about all of these reuniting moments, those were actually the moments that made me really emotional. Like reuniting with Byron, reuniting with Ambrosia, and also seeing Joshua for the first time. All of those things just really touched me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for all the set pieces this game has, and they're obviously incredible, for me, this game is as amazing as it is because of all these characters. I mean, I literally could have picked 40 characters here. And it's funny, my partner and I are watching Deadwood right now, and I'm like, there are like 20 characters in this show that are better than characters in any other TV show. And that's kind of how I feel about this game. Like, there are just so many good ones. And as much as I like the set pieces, it is that moment to moment side quest storytelling that I think is what really pushes us over the top, like what Gio was saying.
God, I really like Deadwood, but the thing that bothered me about that show is everyone is so dirty in that show. I know they're
That's kind of true here.
I know they're cowboys and frontiersmen in Deadwood, but the whole time I'm like, oh man, I just wish who's the guy that plays Swear Engine? Well, I just wish they would all take a shower.
Ian
Basically,
McShane,
Ian
yeah.
McShane. That's it. It's a to him he's the I only know Ian McShane from Deadwood and John Wick, but that already puts him in the top tier of actors in my book. Um, but yeah, the writing in this game is so good, and the more you play, and including the side quest lines, I feel the better the writing gets. And this game just kept outdoing itself. And Tin mentioned Joshua. You sort of Clive has an inkling that that Joshua is still alive, right around the time of Sid's death, because Joshua was able to stave off Ultima, and reveals that he has been sort of he's been sort of shadowing Clive for an undetermined amount of time. Joshua was saved by a secret order of knights that serve the Rossfield family, and he has been sort of working in the shadows the past several years. But they do reunite at one point. The next sort of big gameplay segment of the game after the Titan boss fight is takes place in the Crystalline Dominion, which is sort of which was a neutral country that becomes occupied by the Sandbreak Republic. I'm sorry, by the Sandbreak Holy Empire, and it culminates in some incredible drama happening all at once. Annabella's third son, who she had with the Emperor of Sandbreak, is revealed to be possessed by Ultima. Dion, the Prince of Sandbreak, who's also the dominant of Bahamut, completely loses his mind when his father steps into his own spear when he's trying to kill his half brother, and you get the Bahamut boss fight, which is huge, cool space dragon nonsense that ends with Clive transformed into Ifrit and Joshua transformed into Phoenix, combining into some Phoenix Ifrit like Megazord that was just that was just completely bonkers from the get-go.
I love how this game is Game of Thrones meets Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Yeah,
I was
sorry. Yeah, this fight.
I'm just making sounds. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, I just want to say this fight is when I started getting Asura's Wrath vibes from this game. Like, I don't know if you guys have played that, but it's like
I have.
Essentially,
I have it, but I need to.
Well,
yeah,
I got Asura's Wrath vibes, I think, from the first fight with Garuda, where you have to mash the square button to defeat the Clash. Because in Asura's Wrath, when they tell you to mash square, usually it's like the square button starts exploding all over the screen. And basically Asura's Wrath has the best quick time events ever, and I say this as a fan of Like a Dragon games. But I understand the Asura's Wrath feeling, Gio. I do.
Yeah, I remember that fight where like the sword pierces the moon in Asura's Wrath. Spoilers, but yeah, this was so absurd. This fight was absurd and crazy, and I loved it. And I was around when Tin was playing it, and so I got spoiled. I think kind of hurt the impact, but still, I really appreciate this Bahamut fight.
And the game
arguably
turns into
the centerpiece of the game.
The game turns into Star Fox for a moment, where you have to defeat all the targets around him before you can defeat the main body, and oh man, yeah. It was a genre shift that was almost near Automata like, but I loved it. Again, just incredible level of spectacle.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the spectacle there is remarkable, but I think that now we get to talk about who I think is probably actually the strongest character in this game, who is Dion.
I love Dion.
Dion's
phenomenal.
awesome.
Dion, I feel like goes through such an arc from the beginning to here, where he's trying to sort of navigate things. I like the way they present his sexuality a lot, and some people have complained about it, but how it's just sort of there, and like it just keeps moving, and it's not like a conversation piece. I think that it is progressive on that front, but I think that he is he's so racked with guilt because he's sort of taken over by Ultima, and he destroys all these people in a way. But yeah, I think that Dion is such an interesting dominant for Bahamut in a lot of ways, and I think that he makes the game a lot stronger.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Zach, that I feel like it's not really clear cut who's gonna win Best Supporting Character anymore, because Dion kind of Dion's kind of close to Sid in terms of like fan reception, so I feel like he kind of has a shot at winning that accolade this year.
He plays an important role in the final fight. So
Yeah.
Yeah, Dion is so cool that he really commands the screen every time he's present. Because he's a silver dragoon that they can transform into Bahamut and zooms with they sort of repurpose Bahamut to be the icon of light this time. So he's sort of a holy crusader, but also a classic Final Fantasy dragoon. He's the coolest dragoon in the series, at least since Estinian, maybe since Kain.
Right.
and and is absolutely awesome. And from a very early point, it's confirmed. Oh yeah, he's in a relationship with a man. Dion and his partner care deeply about each other, and that's fine. In a way that again, like, if the people that complain about that being in the game, I don't think we should be friends. But yeah, and sort of when Dion loses his mind, I think his despair is over the top, but also understandable, and similar to how Benedicta's or Hugo's might have been. But
I mean, in his case, he's like probably killed tens of thousands of people.
yeah, no, he probably maybe even more, because
Yeah.
it was a highly populated city area is where he
Mhm.
goes haywire as Bahamut. But he does become an ally at the end, and when he's saving you from Barnabas's forces or Ultima's forces, like he was an extremely cool companion. Like I wouldn't mind Dion DLC personally.
I'm actually glad that he had that chance to kind of redeem himself. Like thanks to that little girl who helped heal him while he was left behind after that entire fight. So and yeah, I'm also looking forward if Dion would get a DLC and would for some reason also I just have this hints, or like I'm just assuming by now that they might show more of that little girl in the future, probably because the art book that I got, and the girl there, apparently her name's Kihel or Kaihel, I don't know how you pronounce it, but the art book is showing of her art that actually makes her look a bit more mature. That she looks older here and with different clothing. So yeah, I'm kind of hoping that there's more to this
Okay, yeah.
for
If there's
Dion's
time,
DLC.
if there's time skip DLC, maybe either Kaihel or Dion or both are present in it. That's
Yeah.
interesting. But let's keep moving on a little bit. The one villain I felt was a little underbaked that I didn't like as much as the other dominants is the one after Dion. That's
Oh
Barnabas.
yeah,
Mythos.
I would agree.
Mythos.
Yeah, but yeah,
It's his whole vocabulary.
yeah, but Barnabas is the king of Walud, which is the king of the neighboring continent. He had some allegiances with the Dhalmekian Republic, but it sort of ends up invading the continent of Storm by in sort of the second or the latter acts of the game. Um, he's also revealed to be basically a tool of Ultima. He worships
Mhm.
Ultima like a god, and he seems impossibly powerful. He's the dominant of Odin. He has a giant black sword. But they make him seem like a credible, powerful threat. But I don't know whether it's his weird mommy issues or how he felt underdeveloped and under emotional compared to the other dominants. I just didn't like Barnabas as much as the other key antagonists of the game.
Mhm.
No, I agree 100%. And I
And
think that there are things there, like seeds they plant, that totally you could do stuff with Barnabas. Like when you take Barnabas out, like sort of like how you have that flashback with Dion to find out what really happened to sort of lead him to destroying the city. I thought we were going to get one of those for Barnabas, or something about his mom out or something. I mean, I feel like part of me thinks that like Barnabas is like vaguely immortal, and they're trying to hold that information back for later to make him more interesting. But instead, like, he's so one note, where it's just like he says the exact same thing over and over and over again. It's like this vaguely nonsensical religious crap. And his design is so cool. Like, it is like the coolest Odin
Yeah.
ever. And Odin's always cool. But like then his fight, which I thought was actually one of the more challenging fights, but like it's not really a dominant fight. After you set that bar up here after Bahamut, I was like, ooh, what's Odin gonna be like? And I was like, nope,
Yeah,
I'm not gonna get to find out, I guess.
I mean, I hope you're good at dodging and countering by this time, because you really need to have your timing pretty good for this Odin fight. It was less of a wild spectacle than the Titan or Bahamut fight, but also just it didn't feel as satisfying to me either. But by this point in the game, I had gotten decent at dodging and countering, so I think I handled it okay. But I don't know. It felt like a letdown compared to how excellent Titan and Bahamut were.
Yeah,
Uh, w-
I think it's because like even early on, like they were already like hyping it up that uh Barnabas is super strong and super powerful, and he manages to manipulate Benedicta and all the other people, and it was kind of underwhelming, I guess, that uh, after the whole Titan fight and the whole Bahamut fight, yeah, like that's the fight that we got, and we didn't really get to know him a lot more than that. But all just like what Zach was saying, that all he ever talks about is mythos and all that crap.
Yeah, and Mythos is Ultima's name for Clive.
Yeah.
We'll talk about Ultima very soon, but again, I thought Barnabas was a very cool interpretation of a Final Fantasy Dark Knight, and this is an
Mm-hmm.
extremely cool version of Odin. But his motivations and his sort of aftermath and his fight, I just thought weren't as good as the as some of the ones earlier, which was a minor disappointment for me. But moving on again, Odin is the last power that Clive takes on. At this point, there's you can sort of clean up all of the side content you want. Do hunts, do side quests for Blackthorn and everyone else to get the ultimate sword. Blackthorn is the smithy of the hideout, and another beloved minor character that we have neglected to mention so far. Well, let's talk about Ultima a little bit. Ultima is revealed at the end to be the god that created the
Mm-hmm.
crystals and
Mm-hmm.
and sort of also uplifted humanity from a primitive state to a more civilized state. But then, after Ultima's form started to leave, he entered a slumber, intending to reawaken when a human had evolved enough to be an appropriate vessel to become a new Ultima. And that vessel is Clive. Like Clive is capable of absorbing the powers of all six icons, or seven including Ifrit, or maybe I'm miscounting. No, 7
I
plus
mean,
7
Leviathan, we haven't talked about the
yeah,
Lost Leviathan, which will
yes,
definitely be
yes,
DLC.
I'm certain there's going to be Leviathan DLC.
Mm-hmm.
That's the
Yeah,
only DLC I would bet on.
yeah.
But yeah, but basically Clive is Ultima's ideal vessel, and Ultima and Barnabas both refer to Clive as Mythos, which gives me Tales of Symphonia vibes. If you know, you know. And but basically is a creator god of sorts that's reawakened and is trying to sort of grasp back its omnipotence that it used to have by taking over Clive and absorbing the entire world and possibly destroying it the entire world to create a new one again, which is, that's some JRPG villain motivation that we've seen a bunch of times. But Ultima is not my favorite villain in this game, but I think Ultima is convincingly powerful and alien seeming. Like this is another existence that is a credible threat, at least, and at least did a good job of setting the stakes of the conflict, and
Uh-huh.
giving Clive some killer dialogue right before finishing him off.
Oh, it's
But
so good.
again, like Ultima, I think for an endgame villain, they at least give us some setup for him. And so I've not my favorite villain in the game, but I've seen a lot worse.
I mean, I like Ultima as a villain, and I actually think that Ultima and Barnabas sort of end up kind of having the same function, which is why I think Barnabas is so weak. Barnabas just says the exact same things that Ultima's already said to you, right? And so I think that it makes it a little bit weaker. But I think that I want to back up for just a second for 1 second here. But like
Sure.
Waloed itself and Ash, I think is a really compelling space. But it's so devoid of everything. There's sort of a rhythm to this game, right? Like you go to a new area, you go to a town, you meet the leader, they give you a something to like go do side quests or whatever, so people will trust you. And that doesn't happen in Ash, because Ash is basically turned entirely Akashic because Ultima has turning everybody into zombies like White Walkers from Game of Thrones. Yes, still here. Um, but I think that here is where the side quests, even though they get dumped on you, become really important because Ash is so empty.
They give you like 20 side quests at once in the
Yeah.
in the final act of the game.
Yeah, it's like 10 and then one quest and then 15. But I think
Yeah.
that it ultimately is what fleshes out Ash, because like my favorite side quest in the game is in a little town in Ash where like someone who was working for Joshua's like sort of group goes to investigate them, and like you kind of help them live their faith out. And like they want to become these White Walker Akashics. And I think it's really interesting. So I think that I wish there were like maybe a little bit more going on with Loot as you were going through it. But I think that the side quests again become essential. Like if you don't do them, like you're missing out on so much context. But I like Ultima. They actually answer your question.
I do like Ultima, but I sort of just think it's I don't know. I don't like having a conversation with Ultima, but I do like Ultima as a final villain of the game. And to go back to Ash and Waloed, it is a bit of a shock when all the cities in Storm that you encounter are mostly living, breathing communities. While in Waloed / Ash, it's only monsters and Akashic zombies and a wasteland. And so it's a bit of a bit of a shock again that again raises the level of stakes and despair taking place in this world. And but I going back to Ultima for a moment, I love the Ultima final battle. This is a kick-ass final battle. You have to sort of summon the icons one by one. The Ultima fight goes through multiple phases. It ends up as a giant crazy space battle. And leading up to it, both Dion and Joshua provide assists to get Clive in a position to fight Ultima. I maybe not my favorite fight in the game because I think Titan is still my favorite fight overall, but a really, really worthy final battle to this game.
I do mentioning those parts when you'd be using different icons to fight him. I find it really cool, or I really love the touch when you hear voices of different side characters, like supporting Clive along that fight.
So cool.
Well, a little bit
Yeah.
of a Final Fantasy IV, you can't give up kind of moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It reminded me a lot of a moment from Endwalker, which I will not spoil for those who have not played it yet.
Mhm.
Reminded me of Earthbound. The final
Oh,
fight.
yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah. Tin, you
It
should
reminded me
play
a little
it.
bit of Xenoblade 3 as well, but not in a good way.
no.
Except for the fact that they both take place in Origin.
I remember.
Yeah.
I remember in the final battle in Persona 4, I was thinking, "Oh, this is a Final Fantasy 4 moment." So I guess like listening to the prayers and hopes and dreams of everyone you've met along the way is a bit of a JRPG trope, but it is not one I have grown tired of.
I am
So
a
it was
sucker for that.
I
kind of
oh
moment,
yeah, it's great. And Final Fantasy 16 is full of so many moments of high emotion and high drama that oh man, the ending is a gut punch. Like it looks like Joshua and Dion might be deceased, and Clive is barely clinging on to life on an unknown shore, but with enough vagueness that I can't say for certain if any of them are dead. But with Jill and Torgal and others mourning the presumed loss of Clive, uh it ends on, and then it ends on a sort of a flash forward where a small family living peacefully knows the story of Clive and Joshua as sort of an ancient legend. But the world seems to be healthy and thriving in this far future, instead of dying from crystal overindulgence like in most of Final Fantasy 16. But we've mentioned DLCs a couple times. Very recently, a week or so ago, they Square Enix announced that there will be 2 paid DLCs minimum for Final Fantasy 16. as well as some new changes like new costumes and glamour options for weapons, which is something that I'm pretty excited about. And now I finally might play this in Final Fantasy mode. But we know that there's a missing water icon, definitely Leviathan, that I think is going to be the subject of one DLC. Do we have any other ideas or hopes for what DLC for this game might be? Because I mean, I'll take almost anything. I'll take just another 5 hunts and 3 weapons.
I really have no idea. Because like I was like, oh, there's going to be a DLC to this game, but like, with the way the game ends, like it's basically like magic is being taken out of the world. I do think that Clive probably survived because like they give you a quill in one of the side quests, and he's probably the one who wrote the book Final Fantasy, which I love that they had that moment here.
Oh, and the moment where Final Fantasy, where Clive yells to Ultimate, he says Final Fantasy
it's
in
so
the
awesome.
actual. Let me find the actual. Keep going, but I'll find the actual line.
Yeah. But I don't know. I mean, like, I would love a DLC that gives us the ability to play as more characters. I think a Sid prequel is the most likely. Even if that involves Leviathan in some way, or I think Barnabas will come up, but I don't know how any DLC to this game is not a prequel, right? So like, I don't know what it will be, but outside of Leviathan, I'm not certain of anything. But I really would love the opportunity to play as some of these characters who look like they would be so much fun to control.
Okay. My concept for DLC is like Jill. It's about Jill, and it's like it alternates between like her experience in the Iron Kingdom and like her looking for Clive, who I also think, like Zach, is alive. So it's like her, reflecting on her past while like, um, her and Torgo looking for her, for Clive. I don't know, like I feel like it's just like this hazy concept of like emotional kind of subdued DLC, not really a lot of combat. That's just my personal wish, I think.
I like that idea, but I also sort of like the idea that maybe Jill becomes the dominant of Leviathan to gain powers in order to find Clive.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh,
like,
that
Sounds
sounds
cool.
like maybe Clive is missing, but they detect him faintly, and she's able to use the power of Leviathan to find Clive. Like I'm pretty sure, like, reclaiming Clive or rescuing Clive will be DLC, and Leviathan will be involved in some DLC. I do not know how or what exactly, but those are my instincts, at least. And I did find the line before striking the final blow against Ultima. Clive says, "The only fantasy here is yours, and we shall be your final witness," which is maybe a little corny, maybe a little
Yeah.
on the nose, but I loved it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
corny and
same.
on the nose in a way I like.
Yeah, absolutely yes.
Yeah.
I think like every Final Fantasy fan in the world playing that in their heart of hearts said, "He said the thing. They never say the thing," and I felt that.
Yeah, same here. Going back to the DLC though, I do think that they would make more, or they would make more content in regards to before the before the game ended. Like it could possibly be, yeah, delving into what happened to Leviathan, and also a lot of the parts when the game had a lot of time skips. So maybe that could help flesh out the story a lot more, apart from um the other dominants having their own character arcs. So yeah, those are just my guesses. But hopefully, I'm gonna just take it all in, and I'm gonna just look forward to all of it.
I mean, I don't care what the DLC is. I'm gonna play all of it, even if it's like an Otome game where Dion meets his boyfriend, something like I would. I am ready for any Final Fantasy VI content they prepare. I think that again, this was a huge budget game that makes a lot of very distinct and deliberate choices. Some bold ones, some sort of predictable ones. Like from the very beginning, I was pretty sure Clive was Ifrit. I wasn't surprised by those revelations, but it was all presented so in such a cool manner that I loved experiencing every plot point in the moment. So I'll play any DLC they have, and I think that we're gonna have at least 2 years of Final Fantasy 16 content going forward, maybe more, because but again, this is the most I've enjoyed Final Fantasy in a long time. Even I think I even like it more than when I was deepest into Final Fantasy 14. Apologies to the 27 Final Fantasy 14 fans on staff. Um, this is such a special game, and even though it is sort of huge budget, uh, in a like, even though it's a huge budget game that plays it safe in some ways, the writing is so good and the story was so good that I just want more.
Hmm.
And I play this thing for a solid 45 hours, and it's like I could play it for another 45. Maybe I will.
I had that feeling like I wanted more, but at the same time, I was actually pretty satisfied with the ending,
Yeah,
to the point
it's a big
that
satisfying game, but I still
yeah,
wanted more because I liked it so
yeah,
much.
exactly. But yeah, I was gonna ask as well, like, how are you guys after finishing the game? Because I was a mess. I was
Oh,
really just
I was weepy.
crying.
Yeah, I was very weepy. Yeah.
When Torgal was sad and started howling a little bit,
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a
that
tough one.
that was rough.
yeah.
At least this isn't one of those games where the dog dies at the end. If Torgal
Oh
or
God.
Ambrosia had died, I might have turned off my PS5.
I mean, my score would have gone down by 50 points. No way. Absolutely not.
This game now has an absolute ceiling of 47.
Yeah, the entire time I was playing the game, like every chapter, I would always just hope that please don't kill Torgo. Please don't kill Torgo. For real.
I'm not sure if I was worried about Torgal dying, but I was more focused on in the moment. But yeah, this is just an overall satisfying game that I don't think even overstays its welcome, really, because you don't have to do all those end game hunts and side content if you don't want to. But it's also good. I did want to.
Mm-hmm.
And this is also, I mean, especially since we were confirmed with the recent announcement of DLC, this is not the last we're seeing of Clive and his friends. But exactly what that'll be, we're not sure. Maybe we're recording this before Tokyo Game Show. Maybe we'll get some details then. Maybe we have to wait considerably longer, but we'll see. But listeners, we've been going at this for almost 90 minutes. Thank you so much for listening to us just celebrate Final Fantasy 16. This is one of the biggest RPG releases of the year. I dare say it's a contender for Game of the Year on RPGFan when year's end happens. But there's also your Baldur's Gates 3 and your Starfields and your Zeldas maybe getting in the way of that. But there's but at least I'm comfortable calling Final Fantasy 16 an on the waterfront contender. And yeah, I mean, Geo, Tin, Zach, is this your favorite game you've played all year?
Yes, hands down for me.
Yeah, I played Hollow Knight at the very beginning of the year, and it's actually close, and I love Hollow Knight. So yeah, it's my favorite game that's come out this year that I've played for sure. And I
Yeah.
didn't even talk about Octopath Traveler 2, which I adored. You know what I mean?
Ooh.
So it's wild.
I thought Octopath Traveler 2 and Fire Emblem Engage were real good, but not Final Fantasy 16 good.
Agreed.
Yeah, for me, I'm not sure. I feel like I just finished Fire Emblem 7, the Blazing Blade,
Oh, nice.
because it just came out on Switch online, and it's like my
Oh
first time
yeah,
playing.
I love that game. Blazing Blade and Path of Radiance are my two favorite Fire Emblems.
Yeah, oh my god, I really enjoyed Blazing Blade, and I think it's probably my favorite game I played this year. No, like, and but that doesn't mean if FF16 is a bad game, or what else did I play this year? Future Redeemed, Xenoblade Chronicles 3. That's a pretty
Oh,
good
nice.
DLC. Yeah.
That
Um,
was also so good. Also,
that
Disco
was.
Elysium. I've played a lot of good stuff this year.
Oh yeah. Oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
It's
So,
really tough.
hmm but I think it's definitely my favorite game that came out this year, and I don't see anything else topping it unless I somehow end up enjoying Tears of the Kingdom more than I am.
I need to play Tears of the Kingdom. I need to play more of it. I'm less than 10 hours in, But I by the time we're ready to discuss Game of the Year, I hopefully will have finished that, and probably more before then, because I have Sea of Stars waiting in my Switch to play next. But
I'm
I
currently playing it now.
oh nice,
Mm.
another game that
It's
was
pretty good, I'd say.
another game that reviewed very highly on RPGFan.com. But listeners, thank you again for joining us on this Final Fantasy 16 journey. I'm sure we'll be talking more about FF16 when Game of the Year stuff starts to happen. But for now, I think it's time that we start housekeeping on this episode. Coming soon on Retro Encounter, we have Breath of Fire Dragon Quarter, 2 episodes coming in September. I need to start getting playing that much more intensely to prepare for those episodes. But I'm really looking forward to playing that, because the last time I played a Breath of Fire game was for this podcast, Breath of Fire 4, many years ago, and I enjoyed the hell out of that. So let's see how the 5th one is. But coming in October, we've started to plan that out already. We're doing an episode all about the present and future of Dragon Quest, I will say, and also another episode on Rhapsody, a musical adventure, which was made available on a Nippon Ichi Classics collection at the end of last year, and recently had its 2 sequels come out on a new collection. And those Marvel Kingdom games were never available outside Japan before. So there's an unusual amount of Rhapsody content happening in 2023, and we'll discuss the original game on 2 podcasts in October. But listeners, if you want to message us about Final Fantasy 16 or Breath of Fire or Rhapsody, or if Torgal's a very good boy or not, you can email us retro@rpgfan.com. RPGFan also has presences on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Discord, YouTube, Twitch, always called either RPGFan or RPGFancom. Also, more recently on Threads and Blue Sky. All the social medias, all the websites, please find RPGFan. RPGFan also has a shop on rpgfan.com/shop, where you can purchase RPGFan emblazoned merchandise, including cups and baby onesies and shirts, and I think keychains, or maybe keychains are still coming. But there's a lot of ways to support RPG Fan, including the online shop. But my favorite way to support RPG Fan is through his podcasts. Shocking, I know. In addition to Retro Encounter, we have Random Encounter every 2 weeks about randomness and current RPG events, and Rhythm Encounter every other 2 weeks about RPG music. You can review Random, Rhythm, and Retro Encounter on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, or however you choose to listen to podcasts. Please give us all the feedback you're willing to provide, especially if it's 5 stars out of 5. But if you want to give us 5-star reviews as people and not as podcasts, let's tell the listeners how they can find us individually, starting with you, Zach.
The best way is probably email, zachw@rpgfan.com. You can also find me on RPGFan's Discord at zachw.
Now, Joe.
You can find me on the Discord as well. I go by Pucci Carrot. That's Puchicarat after the arcade game.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
And Tin, how can listeners find you?
Oh, same with everyone. You can just simply find me on Discord. I'm mostly online, and I go by with just the name Tin.
I would also describe myself as mostly online, but it's become a little bit more complicated. The best ways to find me: on Twitter, I am @TheRealMonsoon. On Instagram, I am Evoker for Dogs. On Blue Sky, I am Sollosi, and on Discord, I am Monsoon Mike, because having a different name on every platform is confusing. Listeners, one thing I'm not confused by is how much I enjoyed Final Fantasy XVI, which is a true Final Fantasy game and is an RPG, and that is the final word on the matter. Thank you, good night, and good luck.